Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 2, Episode 16. It's called Shadowplay. So spoilers for the episode as always. This one's got a few plots going on. The main one is Odo and Dax are down on a weird village, which honestly, if you told me this is the exact same set that Data was just on in his episode of Next Generation, I'd have believed you. It was a very similar layout. It wouldn't surprise me if they used the same base set but just built around it differently, because it felt very similar in size, layout, all that kind of thing.
It also reminds me a lot of the one where there was the village elder on his own last season, in the hut, like that set in there as well.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a disservice that they happen to kind of be back to back, and it's really made me notice just like how this was probably the exact same space they used to film both episodes. But yeah, so they're dealing with the fact that there's people in this village going missing. Initially, they're considered suspects because they're outsiders, but very quickly Odo's like, "No, I'm a detective man. Let me investigate," and he gets into the investigation. But there's also a subplot with Kira, which is also a little Quark related, and there's a subplot with Jake and his kind of aspirations that he may or may not have that his dad might or might not agree with or hope for. So that's the basic plots that we've got going on here. Connor, what did you think of Shadowplay?
I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think the main plot's pretty solid. I think the other two don't do that much for me.
Yeah, I kind of felt a little... I think the main plot's fine. I don't think it blew me away. Outside of one little reference to Dominion, which made my ears perk up because I'm like, wait. Like, the way they're sprinkling that word around, they're really teasing us and building up to what that is. But, yeah, the main plot's fine. I didn't love it, but I didn't dislike it either. I think there's a couple of nice moments for Odo, but it does kind of feel like I don't want to say a filler episode. That feels a bit harsh, but it doesn't feel like an important episode. I'll say that much.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and then the subplots are just kind of, there's a couple of amusing moments with Quark and Kira, but other than that, not a whole lot to get super excited about. So, I mean, it benefits from the last episode of this being probably the weakest of the season, at least from what I can remember, until I go back and do some research. But this is probably not like that high ranking on like this season's like episodes, because this season's had some great episodes, and this is kind of just a more middling episode, especially by this show standards, I think.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree with that. It's okay though, but it's definitely not the worst.
Yeah. So the big thing, which they kind of tease for like half the episode with this main plot, because people are going missing, they're trying to look into it. There's like an old grandfather character and his granddaughter, and one of the people that went missing, the last person that went missing, in fact, is the middle part of that family tree, his daughter, the little girl's mother. And they kind of hint at a couple things. You'll be saying, no, people never leave the village. Okay, there's something going on here. It's not as simple as someone's kidnapping people. And about halfway through the episode, they straight up kind of like realize and confirm, once they step beyond a certain perimeter, they disappear. And seemingly what's been happening to the people who have vanished is that they're just disappearing from existence, which doesn't look that unlike the teleporters in a way. So I think it was kind of neat they had Odo do that in front of the sort of security guy in the village at the start of the episode, because it kind of set up this idea of like just people disappearing. But basically this entire thing is like a big holodeck outside, where the town, all the people are holograms, and like they seem to be alive in the sense that they care, they're scared, they don't want to die, all these things, but they are effectively computer programs. And it's like, okay, how do we help them? Do we tell them that? And they do tell them that. And then there's something else that I did really see coming, actually, which is when they do turn off the generator, because they say, hey, we can basically fix this, but we have to turn it off for a while to do it. So we'll do our best, and we're pretty sure you'll all come back. And not only will you all come back, all the people who went missing previously will all come back. So they're a bit scared by that, but they agree to do it. And the sort of reveal here is that the old grandpa character is still standing there, which I did see coming, and they revealed it exactly how I thought they were going to, which is he's just still standing there. But to be honest, it was the right way to do it. It gave it a bit of impact. It worked.
Yeah, sometimes the predictable things are still the thing you should do, because sometimes they're predictable for a good reason. Like, you're doing the swerve for the sake of doing something different sometimes.
Yeah, and we've already had like kind of the reveal that they're all holograms and stuff. It's not like the episode's been without some turns and things anyway. Because it kind of they hinted it as well that he's not seemingly as concerned about people disappearing, and it's kind of weird that he's not that scared by it. And the only reason that made sense to me is that because he knows that they're all fake, and that or at the very least he understands the context of what is happening here when no one else does. So he was kind of reluctant to let Odo talk to his granddaughter, who tries to investigate. Like, okay, when was the last time you spoke to her? Was she acting strange? Was she acting out of character? And by the sounds of it, she wasn't, and that makes sense because she just vanished suddenly with no build-up. But that kind of gets to the heart of what the episode's really about, is Odo making a friend in this little girl, and him kind of, forming an attachment. The episode starts with him being frustrated that Dax won't shut up about, like, basically office gossip about who's, like, fancying who. And he's like, this stupid human, like, obsession with romance and attraction. And obviously he doesn't have a romantic relationship that he forms throughout the episode, but it's kind of like, he didn't see it coming, he formed a connection with someone and he cares about them, and he's sad to leave by the end. So there's a nice little character story for Odo. That's the main thing more than anything else, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I like the conversation from the point of where they realize the old man's real. That debate, I'm like, well, do we still turn it back on? Is there any point? I liked how passionate Odo was about arguing about that.
Yeah, he's very much, because the old man's like, there's no point in turning it back on because I'm dying soon, and like, we can just leave them be.
They're not real anyway, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But Odo's adamant, no, like, your granddaughter seemed real, and she was only born 10 years ago. She was created from 2 other holograms, like, because you made sure they had that ability. So, like, maybe she's not real in the traditional sense, but she seems to be alive. Should we take that from them? Especially since when they leave at the end, they're all aware that they're holograms, and they're kind of like willing to live with that and kind of accept it and sort of work under that parameter.
I think as well, from our perspective as an audience who has watched Star Trek up to this point, we've seen Moriarty, right? We have seen a holodeck, creation gain some level of sentience and be classed as alive. I don't think what's happening here is all too different from that, really.
And there's no negative to it.
At least with the little girl. Like, maybe some of the others you could argue, well, they're just they are the pre-programmed things, but she is a newer creation.
Yeah, and I think there's other kids as well. It's not just her, so there's a whole generation, effectively. And to a lesser extent, even just throw in Data here as well. The idea that, like, the idea of what is considered our life. It's something that comes up often in Star Trek, is this idea of what do we class as like a living life form that we should respect and take care of. And sometimes it's like, oh, we realize that these 2 planet-sized masses are actually awake and they're speaking to each other. So they're life forms. This is first contact. We have to treat it as such. Who's to say that a hologram becoming self-aware? And they're truly self-aware by the end of this because they know they're holograms. So, and they get to sort of continue operating under that guise. So, I mean, obviously these are interesting ideas. I think the relationship with the little girl and kind of throughout the episode, because he goes up to her and she's a little bit scared at first, and she's like, "Oh, you've got a weird face." He's like, "I'm a shapeshifter. It's difficult for me to do faces. This is just how it is." And she's like, "What do you mean a shapeshifter?" And he's like, "Yeah, I can change into other things." And she's like, "Oh, you're a changeling." Which, by the way, I think the description for this episode last time said something like, "Oh, this was going to be like tying into like Odo learning more about his past," and I feel like that is the loosest possible interpretation of that sentence that we possibly could have had, is him talking to this girl about his, like, not knowing who his parents are, is basically all we get.
Yeah, I think they were fudging it a little bit.
Yeah, which is not on this episode. It's on whoever wrote that IMDb description. Whoever wrote that was a fool. Made no sense.
Yes. Being very generous.
But but they kind of bond a little bit, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't know." She's like, "Oh, my, dad died when I was 4," and which begs the question: why did the hologram father die when she was 4? Well, what are the rules to that? Actually begs that's an old can of worms there. Actually, you could probably think about, but
I mean, it's part. I don't know what he died of in the hologram, but the old guy does say, he programmed that they would, live, get old, die, would have kids. So he wanted it to feel like reality as much as possible.
So he put in like cancer you can get at like 35, just to make it super real.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows what happened, but
so it's a bit cruel. Given he had the option, he could have just said, "No, everyone lives old to their old age and dies. Like no one just gets taken early because of a random illness."
Yeah, but that breaks the illusion.
Yeah,
breaks the illusion for him. That's the whole point of why it's there. Yeah, for him. For him. And this whole thing only exists for him.
All right. Anyway, the point I was getting at is that she says, "Well, prove it, change into something." And Odo's like, "Maybe later." And he kind of explains that part of the reason why he doesn't like to change on command is because that's all he did when he was in a lab. And like people pretended to be his friend, and some of them were scared of him, and it was like this traumatic childhood that he effectively had. Something we've talked about and hinted at in the show before. But of course, when she asks him again when they're walking like just outside the village, just before the perimeter, and she's like, "Hey, turn in," she's telling this story about a changeling. He's like, "Oh, turn into a loaf of bread," and he's like, "Oh, no, because you'll gobble me up." And he kind of like, he dodges it in a kind of fun way, as pleasurable as a fun way as Odo can be in his demeanor. But the thing that I thought during that scene was like, okay, this episode has to end with him doing it. He has to change in front of her into something. And I thought they weren't going to do it because it felt like they'd already said their goodbyes and whatnot. But it's just at that very last possible moment, he just turns around and says, "Hey, kids," and does a Wonder Woman spin into a big spinning top thing, is the best I can describe it. But I'm like, okay, you know what? This was the heart of the episode. He had to change for the girl. He had to like give her the pleasure of seeing him transform into something. And yeah, that was a nice payoff.
I agree. Yeah, it's just like I said, it's just nice to have like that beat at the end because it does just bring their full, because that's how their relationship started with that conversation. It just bookends it really nicely.
Yeah, for sure. Just another little detail I liked here. So Odo like basically offers to investigate all this, and he's getting into it. There's a scene where he like talks to the grandfather character, and it's in like one of their rooms. But I got a kick at the fact that he was like sitting behind the desk and walked around it like he was in his own security like room, like on Deep Space Nine. And I thought, you've just like made this your desk, Odo, somehow. Like you've been here for like 10 hours and you've got a desk.
Yeah, as soon as they're in like about the investigation, we're like, well, we could help. I'm a bit of a detective myself. As soon as he's like that, he's like, oh, he's so taking command. Like he's just taking charge, doing everything now.
Was that meant to be a Harry Osborn?
It was, yes.
Yes, okay. just being sure.
Yeah.
So elsewhere, we have a couple of plots. One is that whilst Odo's away, apparently Quark thought he could get up to some stuff. He's like, oh, well, the security guy's away. I can get up to something. And Kira's the one who's kind of been tasked with keeping an eye on him. And she's like, hey, that's funny. Your cousin like docked here but ran away immediately. Turns out there's a warrant out for him. He stole from a museum on one of the Cardassian like outposts. It's almost like he was coming here so someone who was already here could launder the goods or something. And Quark obviously plays dumb and goes through his motions. He's like, oh, that's the first time I'm hearing of it. And it kind of pivots into like a romance plot for her because the religious Bajoran, the younger guy, comes on the station and she's like smitten with them and they kind of flirt a little bit and it is what it is. And Quark notices this and you think, oh, he's taking advantage because she's distracted with a piece of ass, basically, to put it in terms. But there's a reveal later on where she figures out that a Bajoran that's on the station who's got gambling debt with Quark's the one who suggested he come up and visit, meaning that Quark set this up assuming it would distract her so he could get further away with his schemes. So I will say I like the start of this plot. I like the end when she confronts Quark. Those are entertaining scenes. I don't have anything against the romance she has with this guy, but I wouldn't say that I was all that like enamored with it as it was playing out.
No, it was very Star Trek female character romance subplot.
Yeah, but at least I will say this: this is a character that was already in an episode. This is someone who's come back. It's not some just one-off guest star, and I think we may even see him again, believe it or not. So
I will grant you that they are all objective positives to this.
yes, like we're not on a planet that's inherited like half of Scotland where there's a ghost. Okay.
Hey, we could be. We could do that again.
We're on Deep Space Nine, no doubt. We're not doing that episode again where Beverly Crusher starts getting wet to an apparition.
You don't know what's on the other side of that wormhole. Could be Scottish ghosts all over.
All right, so that was yeah. I have nothing really else to say about it.
I agree. Start and the end, the stuff with Quark, good. All the rest of it, not the worst, but very dull. I liked Kira being like, no, I don't just dislike you, I disdain you. Like that whole bit of like you're an awful thing.
Yeah, because he says, "Oh, like, you're acting like you don't like me," and then she's like, "Don't like you," and she goes on this whole big speech about why she hates him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I asked."
Yeah, it's very Clark about it.
Yeah, that stuff's all right. Stuff with Jake, again, it's the C plot. It's so it's like a bunch of time. It basically boils down to Sisko wants him to get a job because he had a job at his age. Which, I have to admit, if I was living in Star Trek society where money's not a concern, I'd be like, why? why? I don't need money for anything.
No, I get why the parents are pushing the kids to do that. Yes. There's like a learn responsibility as opposed to earn money.
But, which is how he pitches it, because obviously, if he'd said, I want you to bring in money, I'd be like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. You're Starfleet, you don't need money for anything.
Well, maybe he wants to go gambling at Quark's.
Oh dear. But anyway, yeah, so he's basically told to go and be like the apprentice to O'Brien. So he kind of hangs out with O'Brien. O'Brien tries to teach him some engineering stuff, but he kind of reveals that, like, his dad assumes he's going to Starfleet Academy. O'Brien even assumes that, and he's like, why does everyone keep assuming that? I don't think I actually want to go to Starfleet Academy. I don't know what I want to do yet, but I don't think it's that. And O'Brien kind of sympathizes and says, yeah, my dad didn't want me to do this. He wanted me to be a cello player, which I feel like traditionally the parents don't want the kid to be a musician because they see that as the unobtainable thing. But I guess that's the quirks of Star Trek, is we get to have it the other way around.
Yeah, but we are thinking, you don't need to make the money from being a cello player.
That's true. So it's seen as prestige. It's like, oh, my son's an artist. I want him to be an artiste.
So he's a little grease monkey.
Yeah, so he had to disappoint his father and say he's going to be in Starfleet. But now his father introduces him very proudly as, chief engineer of that's
take Bashir's job as well.
He'd love to take Bashir. He would love to emasculate Bashir by taking his job.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bashir, I learned in 2 weekends everything you do. You're irrelevant now.
Yeah. You'd enjoy that so much.
Oh dear. Well, it was kind of like how that episode where they were stranded together and like Bashir was having to do all the mechanical stuff and O'Brien was talking him through it. And I'm like, you could easily flip that around and have Bashir be the one who can't physically do it for some reason and have O'Brien have to perform surgery. Like, it would work both ways round, where both of them are used to dealing with intricate details and stuff and whatnot, and the other one could talk them through it. I don't know, there's some interesting comparisons there between them. Which, by the way, Bashir is in one scene in this episode. He's in a scene with Kira, where Kira realizes she has to go and do some stuff, right? And she gets distracted for the rest of the episode. She says, hey, Bashir, I want you to spy on Quark. And he's like, oh, I'd love to. I've been talking... Yeah, but he's still talking to his Kardashian friend. Was it Garrett? I want to say his name is? From the store.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh yeah, he's been talking to me about surveillance and like spy work. I'm excited about this. I'm up for it. And then we don't see him for the rest of the episode, and Quark was up to stuff that only got caught because Kira realized he was up to stuff. So what the hell was Bashir doing during his supposed spy time?
Maybe we're supposed to take away from this that he's a really shit spy.
I think that's a fair assumption at this point, actually, that he's not very good at it.
Yeah. I feel like he's way too, like, James Bond to be a real actual spy, right? As opposed to like every other, like, quote unquote, like, real spy story, where he's very extravagant, flamboyant, right? He is the Bond of that world, and
everything that's wrong with James Bond, I agree.
Well, everything that's fun about James Bond, but makes him probably not the best spy.
God, I had to watch Moonraker yesterday, right? And
I have fun with Moonraker.
There's a scene in that movie where he transforms his little canoe into a hovercraft. He's meant to be like on the lowdown, and he's driving through the streets of Vienna on a hovercraft. Yeah. No,
I'm failing to see a problem here.
Bad spy.
Bad spy. Good movie.
Not a good movie.
Fun movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will defend that I have fun with Moonraker. I will retract good movie.
The female lead's called Dr. Goodhead.
That's not even the worst Bond woman name, and you know it.
I know it's not the worst, but it's still, like, they should have learned by then.
Yeah. It might be top 3 worst.
That's like a decade or so after Pussy Galore, right? And that was already that's already like a crime.
That's got to be the worst. Yeah, that's definitely the worst one.
Anyway, Shadowplay is an
watch Moonraker again.
Okay episode. You're on your own. That 2 hours felt like an eternity.
So 2 hours long.
Only 2 hours long. Oh, it takes ages to get to the point.
It's been a while. It's been a few years since I watched it. I don't remember how long it is.
Bloody hell. I was more invested in the guy with the metal jaws and his love interest than I was anything James Bond was doing. Yeah. Anyway, okay episode of Deep Space Nine. Not great, not terrible. It's okay.
Just to actually go back to that subplot.
Yes.
I think my problem with that subplot really is that at no point did I ever think for even a second that Sisko would have a problem with Jake not wanting to go to
yeah. And at the end, of course, you're proven right. He just immediately goes, yeah, you have to find your own thing. I understand, son. Done.
Yeah, so all this, like, teenage drama that Jake's going through is meaningless, and it feels meaningless while he's going through it, because we all know, like, yes, Sisko's going to have no problem with this. Like, it doesn't matter.
I think if I had more time, I know it's given the complaint, I realise you're saying more time, but I think if there was more time, they could have fleshed it out into a good reason why he felt this way and worried that his dad wouldn't understand. But because it was so 1-to-1-to-1, where it was just like, get a job so you'll look good in your Starfleet application. Oh, I don't want to go to Starfleet. I'm worried my dad won't understand. I tell my dad. He's okay with it. It's just too ABC.
I agree. I think if you had a bit more with it, you could at least do Sisko at first being like, what? No, of course you go to Starfleet. It's, like, just what would you like? Just him having that reaction, at least for a scene or two, and then by the end being like, yeah, okay, fine, do your own thing.
Or maybe he says something that Jake misunderstands as being more adamant than he is, or maybe Sisko's actually trying to prod him into, like, standing up for himself a little bit and, grow up and say, hey, no, this is me, this is not you, kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think there are ways to do this subplot and have something come out of it, but there's just not enough here to have any of that stakes to it.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look and see what's coming next time. Obviously, we'll be back to The Next Generation with the next review, but when we come back to Deep Space Nine, we'll be looking at an episode called Playing God. Here's a description on IMDb. A Trill named Arjun comes to DS9 to learn what it is to be a Trill with a symbiote, but finds his teacher Dax to be less than he expected. Okay. Dax episode. It's been a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I'm down for this.
Sounds like it could be interesting. So yeah, we'll see for that. But yeah, obviously, as always, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership if you prefer doing it that way. Any support is greatly appreciated and helps keep all the content coming here and over in MailFuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. But that is the show, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, and you know what? Odo ruined my ending, because I was going to critique him for not changing for the girl, but then he did it at the last possible minute. So somewhere out there, he's still spinning and it is a dream.